All right, so you went ahead and picked up Dune Awakening, and right now you are either staring at the character creation screen that has a bunch of different options, or you've already been eaten by a sandworm, and you have no idea why. Honestly, hopefully both. Because that's like a rite of passage in this game. It's kind of like the first Arrakis experience, you know? But there are some things to know about this game, like that it is a survival game, and it looks like a survival game, but it plays much different than any other survival game that I have ever experienced, like Enshrouded or maybe even Windrose recently. This game will literally eat you alive. Literally. My name is Caffeinated Dad, and I put some time into this one so you don't have to learn the hard way. This is a straightforward how to start Dune Awakening guide for 2026. We're going to cover a bunch of different things and how not to destroy your first couple of hours of the game and how to enjoy this game the way that I really do. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more survival content. Dune Awakening is a survival RPG / MMO set on Arrakis, the desert planet from the Dune universe, and this game is made by Funcom. You might recognize that name because they made Conan Exiles. Essentially, you're a prisoner dropped onto the most hostile planet in the entire galaxy, and you have to survive. You have to build a base, harvest a whole bunch of resources, and eventually carve your way into the political power structure of the Dune universe to get the spice. And that's all happening around you. The good news is that you can play this game for the most part pretty solo, and there is a full solo single player mode coming in September 22nd. And if you've been on the fence about this because you thought you might need a whole bunch of other players to play with, or, you know, group play, you don't really. You can basically play this entire game solo, or at least most of the game solo, and have a great time. All right, so with any good survival crafting / MMO, you do have to go ahead and create your character, and the background choices here matter more than they do in other games. For your first class, honestly, you can pick any of the different classes that are available. So the Mentat, you can pick the Swordmaster, you can pick the Trooper, you can pick the Bene Gesserit. I mean, you could do these. However, I personally went with the Swordmaster. The Mentat has been talked about as possibly one of the easier first experiences. The Trooper is like your ranged damage dealer, but that one is a lot harder to deal with because enemies will get close and you can't really protect yourself with a shield while you're shooting at things. Honestly, if you want something more interesting, you can go with the Swordmaster or Bene Gesserit. I mean, they are a lot simpler and straightforward, but it also makes the gameplay a lot more interesting. What I will say is that all of these choices right here are not permanent. You will be able to go back and learn through all the other different classes as you explore. There are places where you can get the advanced trainings. You don't have to worry about this. This is not final. This just determines your first couple of hours in the game. All right, so before you do anything, there's like 3 major kind of like laws of Arrakis that you should know going in and jumping into this game. First, water is everything, and through the tutorial, they do talk about it a lot. This hydration bar in the bottom left essentially is like your lifeline. When it is empty, it will kill you. If you're dehydrated on this planet, you will die. But it also makes you a lot less capable in combat, and your stamina starts like falling straight through. Now, the game will tell you that your still suit manages your water, and it does to a degree, but it is too slow to be your main source of water. You need to actively kind of manage this. And the fastest way to really do this is to kill scavengers and extract their blood using a blood refiner at your base. It sounds dark and archaic, but it works very simple. And it also, the water is used in a lot of different crafting recipes, so it makes everything a lot simpler, and then you get other resources to be able to manage your water, but 100%, you have to manage your water. That is key to this game. The second thing is the sun is trying to kill you. It's that level of Super Mario Brothers where it's literally chasing you down and trying to kill you. During the daytime, the sunstroke bar will fill up, and if it does hit the max, you will start overheating, and it will drain your hydration very, very quickly, and then it will kill you. See the first law that I just talked about. Now, the game is almost kind of like designed for night travel. Like, nights on Arrakis, of course, are a lot cooler, so you use a lot less water, and you can be more aggressive. Honestly, you can travel during both the day and nighttime, and they cycle through, but it's also just, you have to carry that in mind that the sun is your enemy during the day. Plan your route, hide in the shadows whenever you can, you know, stick to the rock formations. It just makes it a lot more simple. Watch what's happening there, because if you get caught out in combat while the sun is out and you are standing out there, it could be a death sentence. And then, of course, Law 3, my favorite one, Shah Halud. The sandworms are not enemies. They are essentially your environmental hazard. You cannot fight them, you cannot outrun them once they've locked on, and your only job is to not be in their way. The mechanics of the sandworm is that they are attracted to vibration. Moving on foot across the open sand is safer. However, riding on a vehicle on sand is a lot more attention grabbing. It will attract a sandworm very, very quickly. The rule is to never essentially stop moving on open sand. If you have your bike and your sand bike is going across, keep moving. If the worm does appear, it has about a 5 or 6 second animation where it'll flail around and then dive back into the sand. The trick is to get to rocky ground as quickly as possible. You need to be moving. What's important to know about the sandworms, and is kind of genuinely terrifying, if one eats you, you lose everything in your inventory. Not your gear, your resources. If you were carrying everything that you have gathered in the last 2 hours on the way back to your base and you get eaten, that's completely gone. There's no way to get it back. This is why you don't travel on sand for extended period of times loaded with loot. Multiple small runs, don't do one big one. All right, so your first base, of course, this is a base building game. It's a survival crafting game. So the first rule, of course, is you can't build on sand. Of course, that makes complete sense. The sandworms that will eat it, you have to build it somewhere on the rocky ground. So if you're looking for a base spot, look for some place that is kind of elevated up and off out of the way. That's just my mind. But you can basically put these anywhere, and you're going to want to try to put it into a place that's relatively easy to get from the ground. Don't make the mistake I did, whereas I made my base super elevated up on the rocks and it was a bad time. The second tip that I would say for your base is don't throw everything at your first base. The story quite literally tells you to abandon it to go into the next section. So all the materials that you have back at your base, grab them. And the game is fair about that. It'll tell you what's going to happen and what you need to do. But that's kind of the plan, is a plan to move, because your first base is essentially just going to be we'll say, rocket launching pad into the next. All right, so for Dune Awakening, the journey kind of quest is your compass in this game. It basically leads you to everything. It unlocks things, crafting recipes, class skill trees, vehicles, all the stuff. Everything just kind of flows through the quests and the exploration of the game. And anytime you feel like you haven't really been making any progress and you're not quite sure where to go, just take a look at your journey quest log. It'll kind of give you the progression that you're looking for. So your first kind of priority as you're going through these journeys, at least in the beginning of the game, to get you understanding of the loop, the main gameplay loop, is to go and clear outposts here in the Haga Basin. There's a handful of them. They give you a bunch of experience, and then a total, I think there's 8 of them. You get 24 intel points. And these intel points are used for unlocking crafting blueprints, and that's kind of the currency to purchase them. You need to get more intel. So always search around, because they're sometimes hidden in obnoxious spots, but search around, find the intel, and then go ahead and unlock the crafting recipes. These are really good experience early on. One of the other things that I would make a very big recommendation is finding a Derek Shannara at the Imperial testing station. He's up above on top of the cliff. He unlocks the planetologist skill tree. This is not one that you can choose at the start of the game, but it is focused on exploration, resource gathering, being able to mind your vehicle a little bit better. This is a very good subclass to have because it offers a number of different ways for you to move around the game of Dune Awakening without any issues. It's really, really good. And also paired with that, the sand bike is your very first mode of transportation, and it makes exploration in the game really, really easy and a lot faster, I should say. And you'll find it in that same Imperial testing station that the planetologist is above. You go down there and you clear that out, and there's a bunch of materials in there that you will be able to use to craft your first sand bike. All right, so combat in Dune Awakening is not necessarily what you invest in early on. And one of the first things that you'll find out is that the combat moves in a very kind of a systemic way, in a systematic way is the better way to put it. And the main thing is that mobility matters more than damage early on. The encounters that you are dealing with aren't necessarily high damage threats. They're, they can take a hit, they can take a beating, and it'll drain your water, it'll drain your stamina, and then it becomes long and kind of drawn out. So I would say invest your first skills into any kind of movement, survivability, speed, stamina, efficiency, water management, things like that. Combat damage can come later, but early on movement and mobility works out really well. Weapons specifically though, I would make the argument that almost all engagements come to some kind of melee combat. The knife is fast, it's usually safer for like the early 1 to 2 engagements, and it doesn't use any ammo. You can just keep using it and it'll be fine. You do get access to a pistol and then later a rifle that you can shoot. But this also kind of makes it a little bit more difficult, especially if you are oriented like you went the Swordmaster route, because as you're shooting your ranged abilities and your ranged attack damage, your shield that you would use primarily goes down and your shield can't be optimized. So if you're taking incoming fire from enemies, it ends up hitting direct contact and it can put a lot of damage onto you very, very quickly. If you're fighting a bunch of different enemies at once, I would say like run away, disengage, and then like try to pick off 1 or 2 of them at a time. One of the things I like to do is to aggro the melee attackers and have them come run to me, and I hide behind some type of cover. You can counter their attacks and then kill them pretty easily. And then from there, you can take on the ranged enemies as they are popping out. One of the other things that makes the game speed up a lot faster, and something that I kind of missed, was going to the Anvil, which is a town in the East Vermilius Gap. And you can purchase an MK2 Cut Ray, and then the Dew Reaper, and then of course the MK2 Blood Extractor. Before you actually need to research them, you could just purchase them outright. And these work really well because those are like your 1, 2, 3 essentials. You'll be able to extract more blood from enemies very quickly. And then on top of that, the Dew Reaper will allow you to gather up some water, harvest water that is in the plants that are all around. And then the MK2 Cut Array allows you to also get into iron and further down the crafting materials. So really good. It makes the grinding a lot easier and you don't have to work on the recipe. Something I really do want to highlight is the idea of this kind of like solo mode, because this is a question that I feel like many people have asked me. Yes, you can run basically the entirety of the first act pretty much solo. Everything in South Haga Basin and even the Vermilius Gap are pretty full playably solo. You can do all that. And you won't really hit a wall that requires other players to break through. However, I will say group play does accelerate progression, but the early game in Dune is actually better solo in one specific way, and it's kind of how it teaches you the game. And my honest opinion is that the players who have joined maxed guilds and immediately get handed all the MK6 gear and they're the best of the best right there. I don't know. I don't feel like that's how the system should work. And it's kind of like skipping a lot of the good experiences. Like the solo experience teaches you water management. It teaches you resource cycling, base building under pressure, the day-night cycle, like the basics of the game. And I feel like if you skip that, it's underrated. The first 100 hours, the first like 10 to 15 hours of Dune is a kind of like a unique personal experience. And that's what I would highlight. Now, comparatively, that of the Deep Desert, that's kind of where the PvP and competitive content lives. Now, personally, I haven't gotten to that point, as that is considered more the end game. But from what I've gathered is that you can 100% go solo into the Deep Desert. It's not a requirement, but it's a lot easier to survive out there if you have friends. All right, so here are some of the quick tips that I wanted to keep in mind for you as you were playing the game so that you understand. One is that dying is mostly fine. You respawn with your gear and your resource pack stays where you died. It's fairly easy to go and get it, especially if you have a resource beacon. The only thing that would be like kind of catastrophic is if you get eaten by a sandworm. That's a full inventory wipe. So, you know, treat the worms like the threat that they are. Second is know the difference between the drum sand and then the quicksand. Both show red on the map, but quicksand will swallow your sand bike and everything on it. The ground looks unstable. Dismount and test on foot first. The drum sand only is fine if you are just going to be out on open sand for a little bit. It magnifies what the sandworm hears, and it'll cause a sandworm to spawn much faster and hunt you down. Something that you can do is also conserve base power, and that is by turning off machines and generators that you're not actually using while you're out and about. Fuel cells drain faster than you think, and while the shields are being protected and they are protecting your base and doing all that from the sandstorms, it can eat through quite a bit of fuel cells and it'll drain your time faster than you think. Keeping and crafting leader johns early on is always a fantastic way to survive in this game. It's essentially the water containers. It's the equivalent of like like carrying a water bottle with you. I mean, just having at least one, and it should be fine if you play the game smart and you know other resources and ways that you can manage your water, but having one just in your backup is always going to be great. Alrighty, so that's basically your Dune Awakening kind of like starter kit. Honestly, this is one of the more unique survival games that I've had a chance to dig into, and the water management system alone is far more interesting and engaging than I would say with other games, because it's essentially its own entire resource loop. And if you've been kind of sitting on the fence because you only like to play on your own, well, now you know that the game is pretty good on its own. I'll keep covering this game as it grows, and if you have already been a part of this channel, then you know that this channel has done a lot of content around Enshrouded, which is another survival game that I highly recommend. But if this video helped you out, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel for more caffeinated content. I like that. Caffeinated survival content. As always, stay caffeinated, folks.